This is the CHGO Cubs podcast. My name is Corey. I am joined, as always, by Brendan. Well, not really as always. This is our first episode together in a
In
couple
like a
weeks, but
month. Yeah. Welcome
usually,
back.
as always.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I am freshly off of a Wrigley Field rooftop after watching the Cubs drop the series finale to the Toronto Blue Jays in a riveting 1-0 game here on Sunday, Brendan. And we have plenty to talk about. So when I last spoke to everybody, the Cubs started the week 3 games out. And this week didn't go that well, Brendan. A sweep at the hands of the Guardians in Cleveland. The Cubs come storming back, taking the first 2 in this Toronto series, Brendan, but the loss today, as of this second, the Braves are beating the Angels out in Los Angeles or Anaheim. So looking at maybe 5.5 by the end of this podcast. How you feeling, Brendan?
Look at you, scoreboard watching over there. High playoff hopes as usual. Corey Friedman, playoff hopeful.
Right.
I mean, if you want to be somewhat optimistic, the optimism is baseball is stupid. I always say that. You have Detroit coming up, Marlins coming up, a weak, soft schedule over the next 2 weeks. If there's a time for an unlikely run, it would be in the next 2 weeks, and you see what happens. But all signs point towards the month of September being one that looks forward to 2025. But
Yeah.
baseball is stupid, Corey.
Yeah, I hear you. Also want to, if you're joining us here live on YouTube, hello, hop in the YouTube chat. If you are listening to us later on your podcast feeds, of course, we welcome you as well. Apologies if my sound is not great. Of course, as we were getting ready to start the show, the cable that plugs into my microphone decided to eat itself alive. So here we are with the backup option. So apologies on
Broken
that.
like this roster, Corey.
Broken, hanging in there. We're trying.
Not even hanging in there, completely
Right.
broken.
Right.
Ay.
I mean, plenty to talk about, Brendan, but I think overall, this week is one that feels like tough series. Cleveland's a good team. You lost a couple 1-run games out there, a tough series, but it kind of goes with everything we've talked about with this team, which is where the struggles you had earlier in the season and the games you gave away and the games you blew and the games that you didn't hit, you can't really afford that type of week. And even the loss today, good series against Toronto, but the one loss, like you've played yourself into a position where you kind of had to be perfect to manage to sneak back and stay in this playoff race in earnest. And, of course, a 2-4 week against some American League foes, not really in that plan.
No, the offense, while some players have taken the next step, the guys in the middle of the order haven't stably produced like they did in 2023 during that second half run. For instance, Seiya Suzuki, not good over his last stretch here in his last 56 plate appearances, batting just 220, only 1 home run, a WRC plus of 85. Last season had a weighted on base average in the second half, as we have always referenced, over 400. Right by Seiya, Cody Bellinger hasn't produced like his second half self from last season. He has a 318 weighted on base average, above average of a 106 WRC plus, but not to the tier that was in the late 2023 season. At the same time, you're seeing Dansby Swanson produce more, Ian Happ produce more. Both of those guys have WRC pluses over 120 in the last 3 weeks. Crow-Armstrong legitimately has produced the most runs of any Cubs batter since the start of August, batting over 300, a WRC plus of almost 150. But for them to replicate those stretches that put them in the race last season, Cody Bellinger, Seiya Suzuki, consistently providing runs in those 3 and 4 spots, and we're not seeing that lately.
Yeah, so plenty to talk about here today. We'll talk about the week that was. We'll look ahead to the schedule. We'll keep an eye, of course, on that Braves game and let you know what the
Yeah, you
up-to-date
will.
standings are. It is 3-1 Atlanta Braves now, and they are threatening to add some more. So it does look like it's going to be 5.5 games, effectively 6.5, because of course the Cubs own a tiebreaker against no one. So it's bleak, Brendan, as we hit the stretch run here of August and into September. We want to talk about the luxury tax situation. I'm sure you were thrilled to hear that interview earlier this week. And we'll, and like you said, we will, of course, while the playoff race is still in the mix, I guess. And again, I know our YouTube chat is going to, some people are going to say, give it up already. Some are going to say that, they're going to be holding on until that elimination number is 0. Do whatever you want, fan however you want to fan. We will talk about some of that stuff. I know you were looking at some of PCA's swing changes and kind of the stuff that's need his hot stretch here. And we want to talk about some of the stuff that's going to be important down the stretch going into 2025. Again, whether you're feeling like this is a lost season or not, or still chasing that last wildcard space, this is going to be an important month and a half for the organization as a whole, regardless of whether they are competing for a playoff spot in a serious fashion or not. There's a lot that can happen in these last 5 weeks or so that bears a lot of importance for what this team looks like going forward, how they attack certain things in the offseason, et cetera, et cetera. Do you want to start with the luxury tax situation?
No, but we will. I don't want to talk about it. I can't believe we have to talk about this, but why don't you run down?
So I did see our good friend Cody Del Mendo at a local Wrigleyville establishment briefly after the game, just to.
Oh, is that why we're so late over here?
Pay my respect. No, we're late because my microphone is messed up.
Well, I'm going to blame Cody for this.
I don't think he'll appreciate that. But, he did say, he was hoping that we would talk about it because haven't had a show for CHGO Cubs. Obviously, they did the Friday 120 Club in the bleachers there since that came out. So basically on the radio, I think it was Jed and Carter Hawkins, saying that they have their kind of like own internal calculations. And it did look like, even though the publicly available data suggests that they're slightly under the luxury tax, their internal data shows that they currently would be over it. Listen, there's a lot of nuance that goes into this stuff. The standout takeaway from me, Brendan, is one, I didn't like how it was conveyed that like they have a couple guys keeping track of this throughout the year, but like there was sort of a sense of like uncertainty with the claim. And, you're kind of looking around going, well, if you guys don't know, who should we be asking? Like, how isn't this more of like an exact science type thing? And what are the two guys that are paying attention to this doing? Like if we're kind of unsure. And the other is there's obviously a lot of takeaways. If you ended up going over the luxury tax, the way that you've managed some of these players is very questionable. The fact that you didn't go further over the luxury tax is then questionable if you're taking the penalties anyway and kind of like starting that clock. There's really a lot of directions that you could go from it. My immediate takeaway, though, Brendan, was given the way this team has performed, given the way how much this roster costs, and if you are potentially going to be paying luxury tax penalties for it, however you want to spin it, whether you think it's a big deal, small deal, whatever, it just doesn't reflect very well on Jed Hoyer. That's really the ultimate takeaway, that they're not really sure that like Neris is close to this vesting option that maybe would push you over. And then you didn't do more at the deadline, even if you're going to be there's a lot of takeaways. None of them look particularly good on Jed Hoyer. And just to address a commentary I'm seeing in the YouTube chat, I don't care about Tom paying the penalties for being over the tax. They should be over the tax every year. We've talked about that many times. What I care about is that they don't seem to think that, and this would be a waste of doing that. And then also the way that Jed kind of approached, this is on Jed. I'm not defending, I don't care about Tom paying the penalties at all.
The way the roster was built pointed always towards being underneath that tier. How I talked about the team, how you talked about the team for the past year has been under the assumption that there is a fail-safe involved for this season. The fail-safe being if you don't show competitiveness which they haven't at the trade deadline, well, you delay the inevitable times that you do go over the tax like they did during that World Series era. There is nuance to this. Sometimes Jed isn't the most detailed communicator with the media. So while it appears as if he's caught by surprise, maybe by perception, I don't really imagine that's the case.
Probably not. Yeah.
Yeah. And the question that I have is how much over are they? Is it really a matter of bonuses hitting, 40-man considerations hitting with different payouts? Can it be mitigated somehow in September through releasing players? Those are the questions I have. But generally, if they do go over that tax, it does suggest inefficiency of the season. And while we don't necessarily care as fans about ownership paying more, I do care about competitiveness for long-term
Yeah.
futures, and it would decrease their flexibility on being competitive. That would
Yeah.
be my general takeaway is
Well,
it's not reflecting well,
yeah.
and it would leave us potentially not as competitive going forward.
Well, and the key too is we don't know how often Tom is willing to pay those penalties. So if you're paying those penalties in a year where you're fighting at this moment to, finish the season at or above 500, let alone like competing for a World Series championship, that's a waste of potentially one of those years where Tom is like, sure, go over the tax, we'll pay the penalties. I'm assuming he is not interested in doing that in perpetuity.
They have paid ownership since they took over $15 million in luxury tax penalties, pointing back to the 2016, 2017, 2018 era. Not that much.
Yeah.
There's always questions like, oh, the luxury tax doesn't matter. It does matter. The penalties do get really severe. And it's not just the amount of money that they have to pay. If they do want to go out and be really ambitious, if they go over that very top tier, they lose 10 spots in the MLB draft. Again, it may not seem severe, but there is value with those spots. There's value in a 20% surcharge you have to pay that
Yeah.
grows over to 30%. There's value in all of this in delaying those penalties so you
Yeah.
can align the pre-arb guys you just traded for. So there's a lot of questions unanswered that I have hearing this news.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, just to bring this, to an end, it is what it is. We'll see if they stay over. You can do some late season maneuvering to get back under. We'll see what happens. Again, like I said, it just doesn't really reflect well that this is a season where you may be going over when this is the output on the field. And like I said, I don't care about the penalties. The penalties aren't that significant. I don't care about a billionaire having to pay them. I care about their willingness to keep doing it. And if this is one of the years where you did it, is that checkbook going to be open next year? Is it going to be open the year after? Because that's how they operate. And we're frustrated about that like anybody else, but that's the situation. So when I read that the other day, I was like, okay, like,
It was shocking.
what?
It was shocking.
Yeah.
Before we do the ad break here, there's been hints of it being possible, although I would be shocked if it happens, but hints of the Cubs replicating what the Angels did last season, where the Angels released everybody they had, about 5 players being hyperbolic here, but they released, I believe it was Hunter Renfroe and a flurry of pitchers, I believe even including Giolito, after they had just
That sounds
traded
right.
for
Yeah.
Giolito. And what was the result of that is those players, those 5 players were claimed by other teams just before the playoff deadline for some of those guys. And as a result, those players who were claimed by their new teams had to pay the remaining salary on that contract. If you want to put this into perspective of what that would mean for the Cubs, if, for example, they released Drew Smiley has around $9.5 million on his 2024 contract. The next team would pay about 15% remaining of that contract, around $1.5 million. So if the Cubs are at the tip of being over, that 1.5 is pretty significant. If you also want to release, despite all the option vesting discussions, Hector Neris, well, he's being paid almost exactly the same amount as Drew Smyly. That's $3 million with him and Smyly released. That seems pretty significant. And then you can start going through the list. You release someone like Patrick Wisdom, for example. You can maybe put yourself back under that tax, but that's embarrassing. And quite frankly, a bad look
It is
for future players coming in when you have your team just saying, you know what, goodbye to these guys who are trying to, in some case, play for their next contract. It would be a bad look for the Cubs and probably embarrassing by their front office.
Yep. All right. So we're going to take our first ad break here, and then we'll get back into Cubs and Blue Jays. We'll talk a little PCA. We'll talk about the Cubs pitching this weekend, et cetera, et cetera. But first, a quick break from our wonderful sponsors.
I have to tell you about this game-changing product I use before a night out with drinks. It's called ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol. Pre-alcohol is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted in a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Free alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make ZBiotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. Every time I have pre-alcohol before drinks, I notice a difference the next day. Even a night out, I can confidently plan on doing podcasts with you, Corey, without worry. Vacations, weddings, birthdays, and reunions. There's so much more going on. Get the most out of your summer plans by stocking up on pre-alcohol now. Go to zbiotics.com/CHGO Cubs to get 15% off your first order when you use code CHGO Cubs at checkout. Pre-alcohol is backed with 100% money back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money. No questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/CHGO Cubs and use the code CHGO Cubs at checkout for 15% off. Thank you, ZBiotics, for sponsoring this episode and our good times. Some beers can say they're brewed for baseball, Corey, but only Blue Moon is brewed by baseball. Beer and baseball just go together, and no beer goes better than the one that was literally born in a ballpark. Blue Moon was created at Coors Field in Denver, Colorado. It's the natural choice for opening day next season and throughout the remainder of this season and the playoffs upcoming. Blue Moon is one of my favorite beers. It's the perfect beer to watch the Cubs, even when they're playing poorly. At least I have Blue Moon to fall back on. From its refreshing flavor with Valencia orange peel for a subtle sweetness and hints of coriander, Blue Moon Belgian-style wheat ale is a one-of-a-kind beer that is made brighter. Its bold flavor, bright explosion of color, an iconic orange slice ritual guarantee, a one-of-a-kind beer experience, perfect for the upcoming brisk August and September Chicago weather. Bringing the ballpark to you with Blue Moon Belgian-style wheat ale. It's one of a kind every time. Get Blue Moon delivered by visiting get.bluemoonbeer.com/CHGO to see your delivery options. That's get.bluemoonbeer.com/CHGO. Blue Moon, made brighter. Celebrate responsibly. Blue Moon Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado.
All right, Brendan. You want to talk a little PCA? Do you
I
want
would
to talk
love
about
to.
the Blue Jays series? I don't know.
No, we got to talk about PCA.
The chat
PCA.
is pissed off.
The
And
chat
I
is typically
understand.
pissed off.
Yeah, the
It's
chat is
okay.
usually pissed off. I understand. Like I said at the start of the show, not a good week. Good series, mostly against Toronto here. Obviously, a disappointing offensive effort on the Sunday. Shota makes one mistake, and of course, as we've seen before, not being perfect, that'll cost you, Shota. Not with this offense. But yeah, I think ultimately, again, this was kind of the setup for all of this. Even as they started the week just 3 games back, the cluster in the National League was of their own doing. We've talked about that so many times, that the inability to beat all of the teams in front of you and the inability to execute at so many levels of the game early in the season, it pays dividends, man. Like they've certainly played better over these last several weeks. You've seen a lot better baseball from them generally, but that doesn't erase that early portion, and that makes every single loss, every series loss, every little thing hurt that much more at this time of the year. And that's unfortunately what this team deserves. They played themselves into this spot, Brendan.
26 one-run losses, Corey. Doesn't even include the one-run wins or two-run wins that resulted from taxing your bullpen and relying on deeper starts from starting pitchers that may have led to Javier Assad having to take some time off and some of these hyper extreme injuries that we're seeing right now. It's been an unfortunate season. It's been one of hitting the lower end of your projections. Obviously, they thought this team would be better, and they've underperformed. The majority of these guys have underperformed. It is what it is, unfortunately, but other guys have played better, and I think surprised some of fans and my fans, including someone like PCA. PCA came into the year, there were question marks about his potential offense for 2024 and just him even being a bat in general for the future. Now, the numbers don't look good as bulk for PCA, around a 285 weighted on base average for the season, but within the last 3 weeks, he's showing signs of rapid changes in development. You can visually see the 3 changes he's made. The first change is he's adopted a leg kick, a more severe leg kick. The example I always give for this is someone like Jose Bautista, who did this before he went on his massive run for multiple years. Other guys have had long leg kicks, bigger leg kicks like Matt Holliday. Matt Shaw is someone within the Cubs who also has a leg kick. Change number 1. Change number 2 was that the angle of his bat pre-pitch is more at like a 45-degree angle, and his hands are closer to his ear. Everything is tighter, basically. And so I think as a result, he's been able to catch up to more fastballs. And now we're seeing with PCA an ability to make more contact than he's ever shown, even at the minor league level. If we look at just that amount of contact, which is better than league average, we're talking 80% contact. That's also coinciding with offense that we have not seen from him ever. Within the last month now, he's progressively boosted that weighted on base average, or just the ability to hit the ball harder, farther, and in spots that generate runs. And within the last 2 weeks now, he's an expected weighted xwOBA over 400, which is crazy to see from someone like PCA. If he were to continue this pace, which typically you don't see someone with PCA's profile continue, we're talking about 400 weight on base average, that equates to over 7 WAR. That would be an MVP type level pace. The sample size is small, 50 plate appearances within the past 3 weeks. But what's not small is the plate discipline changes, the ability to make more contact, the ability to eat and spit on other bad pitches. That's not really a small sample. That's representative of a change that he has successfully made as a 22-year-old. That's a result of hard work, a result of being open-minded and working with someone like Dustin Kelly to take those changes and immediately translate that to results. That suggests to me going forward, when he needs to make another change, well, he has this precedence now where he's successfully done it. And that's why these small stretches are really important for me as a fan looking at PCA in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's noticeable, even if you're not digging into all these changes or digging into the numbers, just the clear difference in watching his plate appearances, the confidence that he seems to have, the quality of those plate appearances. But it's a very significant development, Brendan. I mean, you see what he's able to do on the base paths and in the field, and he's going to get better at both of those areas. He's still a very young player, still gaining that experience, reading MLB pitchers, MLB catchers, all that other stuff, working with his fellow defensive players, on this Cubs team in the outfield and the infield. But you look at, like, right now, he's got like a 600 OPS overall on the season. He's been worth 1.2 wins above replacement. In the last 30 games, he's got a 731 OPS. That's almost 100 at bats, 99 at bats. you condense it further, as you did, those numbers get even better. The reason I say all that is it's very easy to see this guy is an extraordinarily
Yeah.
valuable player. He's performing overall at a 600 OPS level,
Yeah.
and he's already worth a full win above replacement. And all of that is only going to tick up. And as
Yeah.
you continue to see, I said it earlier, like you feel those moments where it feels like it's clicking for him in terms of
Even
seeing
before the
MLB
runs
pitching.
came, you saw
Yeah.
the plate approach look better before the runs started to produce.
Yeah. Just a major difference. And so, like I said, when we're trying to square those things of like, okay, like this season is still going, there's still stuff to pay attention to, but what does it mean for next year? And what are those kind of important developments? This trajectory continuing through the end of the season, Brendan, would give you that confidence that as you head into next year, PCA is ready to kind of take that next step. And he is clearly your center fielder of the future, and you're going to get more confident. Craig's going to get more confident moving him up in the order and thinking more on like, okay, we have this explosive player. He's made these adjustments. He's gotten his legs under him at the MLB level. Now, how do we kind of unleash that in the
Yeah.
lineup? Where do we put him to kind of get this like ideal output? And there's still ways to go. That's not all to say that it's clicked. He's done. He's an all-star now. Like there's still going to be slumps. There's still going to be
Oh, he's
adjustments.
not?
There's still work to be done. But I think when he first came up, especially given that age, there was so much like way too quick reaction from how overmatched he looked. And he did, but I think
You
too many
looked bad. You
people,
looked bad though.
he did.
Like really
Too many
bad.
people lost that context of like, this guy is
Yeah.
22 years old. He's being thrown into the middle of a playoff race and asked to adjust to major league pitching. And everybody was
Yeah.
kind of freaking out. And you're seeing kind of that long-term process paying off and just that patience of like, hey, give him some time, let him like adjust at 23 years old and
Look how
he'll
beneficial
get
that
there.
stretch was
Yeah.
though last September. I mean, he looked awful.
Yeah.
There were questions, as you said, that were pretty extreme ideas that he couldn't adjust, but just being exposed like that. And I imagine if I were Pete Crow-Armstrong and I did not get one base hit in my cup of coffee last September, that would have wrecked my brain the entire offseason. So look what PCA did. No base hits in September, goes for the offseason, and he gets beyond that rough stretch, makes those adjustments, comes in spring training, and you see a change, more of rigidity in his batting stance. Has some success, still not quite where he wanted to be, makes another change with Dustin Kelly. Now you're seeing him be the best offensive producer in the past 6 weeks with the Cubs. It's really encouraging to see someone have that mental fortitude to get beyond some rough stretches in a player development trajectory that's unorthodox with COVID, not getting playing time, being thrust into the playoff hunt last September and failing. I'm incredibly impressed with what he's doing. And it's exceeding my expectations offensively the past month.
Yeah, I mean they're in a season that has been very disappointing and has left a lot to be desired about certainly some players and definitely people running the organization. And we'll get to that, when the time comes. There has been a lot of really good developments and really good things that help to build a healthy organization as you go forward. PCA is certainly one of them. Michael Bush certainly another one of those.
And he
And
looks a lot better too lately.
yeah, and
For a
Shota
long period
Imanaga,
of time.
who you saw on Sunday deliver another really stellar start, albeit a short one. Those are really positive developments and things that matter as we go forward. And, as you're thinking about how to build this roster, those are very significant developments and ones that weren't guaranteed, Brendan. There were plenty
No.
of questions about Shota when he came over and how he would adjust, where he would kind of slot in an MLB rotation, and that has certainly turned out on the higher end of what a lot of those projections were. Michael Bush has gotten better and better and better defensively over at first base. His overall offensive production has been very nice for this team and fairly consistent for the most part relative to an offense that has been all over the place this season. Michael Bush has been one of their best producers all season. And of course, as we just talked about, PCA and his continued development. Still plenty of questions, still plenty of things that this team is going to have to iron out and address. But after spending, the last 4 years since Anthony Vincent Rizzo was traded, like who's playing first? Which guy is it today? Is this guy going to work? Is this guy? It's nice to sort of feel a level of comfort there. And, to have that stability in your rotation with some of these guys. So again, plenty that has not gone well, but there is a lot that has gone rather nicely for the Chicago Cubs.
Okay, let's take our second ad break here. Come back, finish this lovely conversation about this 2024 Cubs roster, even though we do have some encouraging stuff that we're talking about right now. But break here from Sunnyside. Sunnyside is your home for judgment-free cannabis shopping, a place where all kinds of visitors are welcome to explore, discover, and purchase a wide array of high-quality products. Sunnyside has everything you need to elevate your summer. One-stop shop for all your cannabis needs. Sunnyside has an expertly curated menu with over 100 strains to choose from, plus easy online ordering and in-store pickup. Sunnyside is Illinois' favorite dispensary with locations in the city, including Wrigleyville and River North, to the suburbs in Champaign, South Beloit, and more. If you're just starting out, Sunnyside has expert guidance and brands we know you'll love, like Good News and Mindy's. Here for the summer is Good News Tea Time Disposable Vape, bringing classic lemonade flavor that's perfect for the golf course, because we all need a little help staying loose on the green. And just in time for Lala is Free Spirit vapes and cartridges are all new from Good News with a lush mango flavor. These vapes are perfect for tapping into your flower power. Visit sunnyside.shop for bright buys every day, including 50% off your first 3 online purchases. Enter promo code HICHGO at checkout to qualify. Exclusions do apply. Sunnyside Cannabis Dispensary, bright buys every day, only for 21 and over or Illinois medical card holders. Shop Ray Chevrolet and secure the right new Chevy and price for you. That's because their new car clearance event is going on all month long of August, and you can shop their huge selection of new Chevy models now at new low prices. Visit our partner this August at their location on Route 12 in Fox Lake or at raychevrolet.com. As one of the top selling Chevy dealers in the Midwest, you'll always be able to shop one of Chicagoland's largest Chevy inventories. And right now, get 0% off financing, make 0 payments until 2025, put $0 down, and find 0 hidden fees on all new Chevrolet models. Jed Hoyer is probably loving that. Or cruise into August your own way and shop over 125 of their vehicles priced under $20,000. And if you've heard of the Ray Chevrolet, then you've also heard of Ray's Price Promise. They're guaranteed to make your next vehicle more affordable than ever with no price changing, no add-ons, and no hidden fees ever. That means they're incredible prices we're talking about now. You can expect to see them the very same when you shop Ray Chevy in store or online. Shop the new car clearance event all month long by visiting Ray Chevrolet in Fox Lake or raychevrolet.com. They've been serving the community since 1963. Together, let's drive.
All right, Brendan, I know you wanted to talk a little Isaac Paredes. Weird situation today. He's scratched with some shoulder stiffness, soreness, whatever they called it, but he does get a pinch hit spot. I know we all love that one.
It's weird, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's weird.
I don't know. I've given up on trying to figure out how they handle injuries and what the situation with the medical staff is.
It's okay. We got Corey's dog Dexter in the background, not happy with Isaac Paredes. But with Isaac, I will say, seeing the way he was used in Sunday's game was kind of peculiar. He was scratched due to right shoulder soreness. And so I'm thinking, oh man, this is not good. This might be explaining why we've seen some of the struggles with Isaac over his first few weeks with the Cubs. And the struggles have been for real. He's been, from a WAR perspective, the least productive player on this roster since being acquired by the team. Negative 0.3 WAR. That's not because of defense either. His defense has been basically fine, although he's had a few errors, but he's only batted 140 in his last 60 plate appearances. 2 home runs, granted, but not the high batting average output that you saw. A WRC plus of 50, which is the worst of anyone on this team with more than 30 plate appearances. So it does leave you questioning what's going on. I wouldn't say that it's something to expect going forward, because if that is, well, he's one of the worst hitters in the league, but it is just weird. Visually at the dish, it looks like he's not overmatched. It just looks like he's not hitting the ball hard. He's not hitting the ball with authority. And I know that's been a part of his game, and he's been described as a heavy pull side guy. We've seen that display throughout his first few weeks here, but even without that, you're just not seeing authority with his batted ball profile. I don't know what to think. I would like to see over the next 6 weeks him hitting more balls with authority, more of those fly balls to the heavy pull side that are just hit further. But maybe some of the explanations for his lackluster first month with the Cubs is due because of that shoulder soreness that he was scratched for.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's one of those things where maybe you would look to that, but then it's like, well, why is he pinch hitting then? If it's like something that's nagging and bothering him, like let's deal with it then. Like, why?
I mean,
Again,
I don't like that.
I digress. I don't know.
I digress too. If to me, when you pinch hit someone who's dealing with a shoulder injury, one at bat has such a marginal impact on your season, and the risk in that you continue to keep that sore and enable maybe some bad habits or whatever,
Yeah.
that was very
Well,
unsettling for
and
me.
I guess my thing is just like, is he either he's hurt or he's not. Like either you're giving him the day off or he's not. If it's a problem, go get it taken
Right.
care of. You have other
Right.
people who can pinch it. I never understand that, but I don't know. I'm not in the dugout. I'm not a doctor. I don't claim to be one on TV, but I think I'm still confident in the move. I'm confident in Paredes as a player. It's obviously not been the start that you want, but we also knew, look, he has a unique batted ball profile. Perhaps there's some adjustments going on to move away from, trying to hit those homers straight down the line and find a better, way forward at Wrigley and have more success specifically at Wrigley. Maybe it takes some time. Unfortunately, as we've seen with other moves in the past, that move was one that was made with the future in mind. He's still going to be here. You still have him under control. It's one that gets put under a microscope and you look at kind of the slow performance to start. And it's like, well, for 2024, we don't really have a lot of time for that. Like, we kind of needed you to come over, slot in the middle of the order and just start hitting bombs and, put up a, whatever OPS. The slow start is magnified because it's an offense that was struggling in the first place. And of course, you just don't have the time to weather this kind of storm. You need everybody kind of performing because every game is of the utmost importance. So long term, again, still confident in the move. I think he's going to be a productive hitter for this team. But yeah, is it the shoulder? Whatever it is, you needed better production than this to start. So it's, yeah.
Yeah, if there's room for optimism, the poor offensive output is not due to striking out more. It's not due to hyper aggression that he's never showed before. It's strictly due to weaker batted balls. That's it.
Yeah.
Because he's not striking out more and chasing more, I just project going forward, eventually he'll square those up. He has a unique ability to be selectively aggressive, and that's persisted with the Cubs. I am still optimistic. I still have questions, though. I still have questions whether that profile long term can lead to success, because no one has had that profile in the past. It's fair to question it. I also think it's fair to assume that he's going to be bad going forward because of that unique profile is also not particularly rational. He's an outlier. There's not many guys like him. And the only way to find out if he can be sustainable is to see this in larger sample sizes.
Yeah, I mean, look, like I said, whether it's something with his shoulder, making adjustments, et cetera, I think the only way I would be particularly concerned is if he was hitting a bunch of line drives down the left field line that were getting caught. And
Yeah.
then it would be like, well, like he's doing his thing, but it's not working here. That's not
Th-
really what's happening. So something else is going on.
yeah.
And again, whether it's the shoulder adjustments, just sort of reorienting himself, being in a new organization, new team, new ballpark every day. You're playing more day games now. He's playing outside all the time. Obviously, he's been stuck in awful Tropicana Field for the last however many years. I don't know. I believe in it long term, but I think everything we talked about in the episode when that trade was made still stands. It's, as you pointed out, it's a unique offensive profile. It's far from like a sure, certain thing. And, he's just Juan Soto. It's not like that. So it is a particular thing, and we'll have to see how it proceeds forward.
I wouldn't say, and this is going to be maybe perceived not with the intention I want to say this, but I wouldn't say I believe in the profile. Belief for me
Well,
is
I think you
strong.
said that on the initial show.
Yeah, belief for me is strong conviction that it's more likely to work out than fail. And with him, it's more of a question. I'm not committed either way. It's more of a question. That being said, Morel has significant questions as well. So the situation is one of unpredictability. I understand why the move was made, but still the front office is going to be judged on that move in long term if it plays out. But I wouldn't say that I'm convicted that Paredes is undeniably going to be a heavy offensive contributor. At the same time, though, I see the reason for it to happen. And I would not discount that to happen whatsoever. And I do, if there's one thing I do believe in Paredes, I believe in the swing decisions. That is very impressive how he's been able to pull the ball consistently with really fine-tuned swing decisions. And that is what gives me confidence that even though I may not be fully on believing he can be, a 90th percentile outcome bat, I do believe that those types of decisions can eventually lead to heavy offensive output.
Yeah. All right. So I'm scoreboard watching. I'm keeping an eye.
What's the
We'll talk
score? What do
about
we got?
that.
What do we got over here?
The Braves won. So
All right, season
yeah,
over.
problem. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. We'll sort of set the stage at the end of the show, kind of see where we are.
Did the
What
Brewers win today too?
does
I
that
think they
matter?
won. I don't know. I'm
What
just
does that
curious.
matter for? They're like
I'm
12 games behind the
well, I'm just
Brewers.
looking right now. Yeah, Cleveland lost
Yeah.
again. Thank you, Cleveland. Although thank you, Cleveland, for other reasons too.
We'll
Like,
always have that, won't
what
we?
are you talking about? Actually, what are you
We'll always have the 2016 World Series, Brendan.
that they won,
Won.
right?
The
Okay,
Cubs
just making
did,
sure.
not Cleveland.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yes,
don't get it
Cubs.
twisted.
Cubs won the World Series. Correct. Yes.
Kevin Wells and I talked about this last week, but again, and in kind of the let's look around and see what matters for next year and stuff. The Cubs have gotten some really good production out of some of these guys in their bullpen. In particular, like Porter Hodge looks really good. Tyson Miller, again, like for the stuff that's gone wrong, the stuff that's gone well, like that was a good move from this Cubs front office. They pounced on that early. That was a pre-trade deadline move. And Tyson Miller has been virtually unhittable since joining this team. Jorge Lopez has come over and looked really nice, pitched some good innings, big innings for this team. So they've it took them a while, and unfortunately they blew a million games before they got there, but they've found a really nice healthy mix for this bullpen. Some really good setup men for Hector Neris to screw around with when he gets in the ninth. But just really good stuff from some of the guys in this bullpen, Brendan.
Yeah, over the course of the past 7 weeks, dating back to July 1st, Tyson Miller has a 1.1 ERA, Jorge Lopez, a 0.9 ERA, Porter Hodge, 2.4 ERA, Ethan Roberts, who was called back up and went through all that injury rehab for the past year and a half, 2 years. His 7 innings of work, 1.3 ERA. Those guys have changed the tune of the bullpen, although it still isn't quite where you want it to be. Even Hector Neris, who should not be closing games on a competitive team, even since July 1st, he's had a 3.3 ERA, which is kind of funny to think about because every time he pitches, it just looks as if everything's about to implode. And it did. Was it Friday's game or Saturday's game where he blew that 3-run lead? So overall, despite some of the inability for them to close out the ninth inning, at times they've been able to resurrect careers for someone like Jorge Lopez, who was released by the Mets. Nate Pearson also looks pretty good in his short stint here with the Cubs. He has a 2.9 ERA in just under 10 innings. And Drew Smiley as well has had a strong second half at 2.1 ERA. These are really impressive numbers from 7 guys in the bullpens. It's just not matching towards the super high leverage moments. And even with all that success outside of Porter Hodge, they're not getting the whiffs. So they're having the success at times, but in crucial moments, some weak contact, some poor calls that should have led to outs by the umpires, they're not missing enough bats to get beyond the randomness, and that's hurt them in one-run games yet again.
Yeah, it's just been nice to see some of the development. Obviously, you got like Porter Hodge that you're bringing up through your system and having that success. Tyson
Would
Miller,
you
a
like to
guy.
see him the closer, Porter Hodge, right now, of all the guys?
Well, so that was sort of going to be the next thing I was going to ask. Because we've it's been a really good stretch for Matt Shaw in AAA. There was the rumors, I think, earlier this week of maybe Owen Casey getting a cup of coffee this September. And I see it in our YouTube chat from James Colstock asking, who's coming up in September. And, that is an interesting question. You have a lot of guys who we've talked in the past, kind of the frustration of not giving certain guys a little bit of a chance to kind of see what they can do at the major league level so that you have some sort of idea of what they might be able to contribute going into next season, rather than asking these questions in spring training and throwing a guy out there in April. Matt Mervis being, I think, the most frustrating, perhaps, example of that. And so it does beg the question, like, you look at the standings, you kind of see where things are. Like, at what point would you maybe say, hey, like, let's see what some of these guys can do? Like, this year isn't going to happen. We can kind of let some guys get a little more rest every now and again. And I want to see what this guy can do. I want to prioritize giving this guy an opportunity. Ballesteros, another guy who certainly comes to mind of like, if you were a game out of a wild card spot, would you be messing around with that? Probably not. If you're ticking more towards 6, 7, and the calendar's flipping to September, do you prioritize, hey, like, we don't have, we can't field 9 of these guys, but should we bring some of these guys up and focus on giving them a little shot here at the MLB level?
In a perfect world where the 40-man isn't valued so highly and there is value to a lot of those spots, then you would probably see many of the guys you're talking about sooner rather than later, including in 2022, Matt Mervis during that September run. The principal reason we're not seeing them is likely driven by the 40-man. Owen Casey's not on the 40-man, Moises Ballesteros not on the 40-man, and that's going to slow down maybe some of the decisions they want to make to open up flexibility during the offseason and spring training next season. I've talked to you about this, and I'm stupid with the 40-man. I fully admit that. I'm stupid with the 40-man because I tend to value stretches that PCA went through in September last season for 2 reasons. The first reason is you learn about PCA or players of similar age, and you can account for moves that you need to make in the offseason and account for what you need to see happen over the course of next season. It's information gained that I value more than a 40-man roster spot that typically yields minimal value at the back end, first and foremost. Second is those stretches for certain players, it opens them up to what they need to change. You can't project how a player is going to fail or respond to that failure, or what that is going to open that player up to adjustment wise. For PCA is the prime example of what that led to. Christopher Morel, also a prime example of that 2022 run. There was 40-man flexibility there that permitted that, but he was able to go through that cycle faster, and eventually led to a trade to get someone like Paredes. So that rapid call up that we saw from certain guys was really beneficial for players. It doesn't always work out like that. Jeremiah Estrada didn't work out very well. Braylon Marquez in 2020 didn't work out well. So it's never a full thing or a full guarantee that it's beneficial for the player, but I'm personally willing to gamble on that and gamble some of the 40-man flexibility to really push the extreme boundaries of rapid player development. And for Porter Hodge, maybe that means you still go out and try to give him opportunities to save games, but we're still within this weird territory. It's unlikely, but if they go on a massive tear here in the next 2 weeks against the worst teams in professional baseball, then there is a weird situation where they fall back in 2 games back of the wild card race. And it does give credence to the intention of trying to win. And if it doesn't happen, then you change course and then you shift to my thinking that's stupid and promote these guys and be extreme in their development.
Yeah, because I mean, I see it in the YouTube chat and, certainly across social media all the time. Like, there's a lot of people that are like, why are we giving innings to David Bodie in the field instead of some young guy who could get the experience? Or why is Patrick Wisdom taking these plate appearances at this point, like in his tenure as a Cub? And I understand. Again, they started the week 3 out. So the priority is going to be trying to make the playoffs and still that. And, again, even as bleak as it may look after the results today, still a little under a month and a half of baseball left. As you said, Brendan, you've got some bad teams that you're able to play. Whether we think they should or whether everybody, on social media thinks they should, like they're going to try to make the playoffs if that opportunity is still in front of them.
The next important deadline is August 31st. That's important because that's the playoff eligibility date for players, which means if the Cubs are clearly not going to be competitive in September, they can embarrass themselves and release Drew Smiley, Hector Neris, and whomever to get underneath that luxury tax. That way, teams who are competitive are motivated to take on that prorated remaining salary for September. So this next 2 week stretch is going to determine whether we see 40-man openings. You release Drew Smiley and Neris and those guys. Well, now those 2 spots, Owen Casey, it's yours. Moises Ballesteros, it's yours. So this is going to determine what we see from September and the Cubs' idea of this team can be competitive or not.
All right, so let's set that stage, shall we, Brendan? So the Atlanta
Sure.
Braves do win on Sunday.
5.5 runs.
And so your wild card race as it sits at the moment, San Diego 3.5 up on everybody below them. So add an extra 3.5 games. Arizona 2.5, so 1 behind the San Diego Padres. Then the Atlanta Braves, who everybody in this third spot is chasing. The Mets are 2 back of the Braves. The Giants won on Sunday, so they are 4 back of the Braves. The Cardinals a half game ahead of the Cubs, 5 back. And then the Chicago Cubs at 5.5 back of the Atlanta Braves. So that puts them, if you're doing the quick math, 8 behind Arizona and then 9 behind the San Diego Padres. Cincinnati just a half game behind the Cubs, and then the Pirates a game and a half behind the Reds, the Nationals, the Marlins, and the Rockies all bringing up the rear. So that's a lot of teams, and that's a lot of games, Brendan, to make up. Again, the Cubs don't have the tiebreaker against anyone, so it's effectively 6.5 games behind the Atlanta Braves. Have seen crazier things, and as we saw, the Cubs were 3 out to start this week, and they've managed to lose 2.5 games, in that span of a week. So crazy things can happen. You look at the Cubs schedule. So upcoming this week, an off day on Monday, and then 3 at home again at Wrigley against an underperforming Tigers team. Not a horrid team. They're not like as bad as, the Rockies or the Marlins here, but underachieving, I think 15 or so games under 500. And then the Cubs do head out on the road to play the lowly Marlins in Miami this weekend. So that is your 6 games this week. Then you have 3 on the road against the Pirates, and then a series against another really bad team in the Nationals before 1 more against the Pirates, and then that, very tricky stretch to start September with the Yankees and the Dodgers. So an interesting schedule, Brendan. Obviously, an opportunity here this week against some teams that you ought to be beating. I think it's, it was disappointing to get swept in Cleveland, but especially losing those 2 one-run games. It's, I'm being told in the chat the Tigers are 4 under 500, not 15. So, I don't watch the Detroit Tigers, guys. Sorry.
That's a big difference.
I
Who
made up a
counts on those
number.
fingers over there?
Yeah. It is a big difference.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's not going to be a cakewalk. But what I was saying about Cleveland, you lose 2 one-run games in that series on the road against a Cleveland team, that is flirting with one of the best records in baseball at 72 wins right now. It's not the end of the world. It's not the worst thing. Getting swept can't happen given how you played earlier in the season and the situation that you're in. But there's worse things than losing close games to a really good Cleveland team in their ballpark. As we go into this week, though, Brendan, you got to take care of business against the Tigers and the Marlins. For whatever chance this team has left in them, you have several teams to climb over and a hefty amount of games to do it. So I never like, saying that sweeps are necessary, but I got to be honest with you, Brendan, anything less than 5-1 in these 6 games just doesn't feel like it works, does it? Those 2 losses feel like they're going to kill you, even if you took 2 or 3 from both of these teams.
You need to win every game this week. 5-1 would be great.
It does feel that way.
I'll be honest with you though. If the Cubs make the playoffs, it is, great, of course. I've already moved on. And a playoff sneaking into as a wild card team, and it would be very fun. I'll get behind it. I'm a stupid fan. I love that. And maybe you win a series or 2 and find yourself in. Of course, I'll buy into it. But I've moved on to starting to think how this can work for 2025. That means I'm dialing in on PCA's progression. Hopefully, Jordan Wicks is healthy to get inserted back in the rotation. Wanting to see bullpen guys continue their development, including Porter Hodge. And then the AAA guys, Alcantara, Casey, Ballesteros, Shaw. I want to see some rapid changes and success to finish up their tail end of AAA and maybe some promotions. And that's kind of taking my full focus. It doesn't mean I don't watch every single game, which I do. It just means that when they lose in the fashion that they did on Sunday, I'm not taking it as hard as I was back in May and June. I'm accepting this is the team. It's likely not going to be a fun next 6-7 weeks, although there is a possibility. And because of that, I'm moving on. I'm looking forward to watching the pieces with great intention that could contribute for 2025.
Yeah, I mean, this team certainly just has not inspired the confidence. Again, we look at this because that's the situation. After, coming into the week, they were 3 out. I had a hard time articulating my position, I think, last week, which was definitely not that I thought this
You
was
were definitely back
all
in.
of a sudden a good team, but it's listen, 3 games is 3 games. The situation is the situation. But of course, yeah, this team is who they are. To quote the late great Dennis Green, they are who we thought they were. They've played a ton of baseball this year at a very specific and consistent level, unfortunately. And that has been kind of an average level. And it's one that a lot of us saw coming in the offseason. And unfortunately, yeah, this is what it looks like when you play a bunch of close games and 1-run games. And it all comes down to these little things. And as we've said before, unfortunately, there's going to be any number of games you can look back on when this season is over and they're officially eliminated or whatever and go, yeah, there was a lot of really easy opportunities for them not to be in this situation. But that's kind of the roster that they built and the season that they were kind of always going to have.
I do caution that 5.5 back is unlikely to make they make the playoffs at this point. But I do caution is saying, oh, it's 100% certain they're out. It's happened so many times in this league where a team 5.5 out, they play hot for 2 weeks, they find themselves back in the playoff hunt. The Diamondbacks did that last year. The Braves did that in 2021. It happens. This is why baseball is so stupid, and exactly the reason why I need my team, the Cubs, to go into the year as a 97 plus win team. I hate stretches like this. I do not enjoy watching baseball in this mediocre coin flip fashion. I want to know that baseball is more likely to not let me down. And that is accounted for when your team is clearly a 97 plus win team.
Yeah, well, and look, we always use the Dodgers as a sort of good example of running things and positioning. But I think in particular to what you're talking about, Mookie Betts missed several months. Every pitcher they have is hurt
Yeah.
basically, and they're still in the front of the division. The Padres and the Diamondbacks have been surging. It's closer than it was at other times, but they build that projection, they build that roster so strong that sure, our top guy's out for 3 months, no problem. We'll
Yeah.
still comfortably make the playoffs, and maybe we have to have a little scare for the division toward the end of the year, but you have that all built in to weather the storm, and the Cubs just don't. Everything kind of had to go right, and it hasn't throughout the
Yeah.
year, and some of it has gone right, but some of it continues to not go right. And you didn't build a roster that could afford that. So that's really what you're looking at. I did see it in the chat. Yeah, this is going to be Javi Baez returning to Wrigley Field.
Is that his first time since the trade?
I believe so. Or
I don't
no,
remember.
as the Mets? I don't know,
I don't
dude.
know.
Maybe.
I block out that entire stretch, 2021.
Who
Blocked
knows?
out.
Yeah, look, I mean, I hope this goes without saying, but he should be welcomed back with a raucous ovation, cheers, and good memories. Anything else I think is pretty weird. But you do you. But it'll be nice to see him. Hopefully he gets a nice little, video montage and a good ovation. We've seen a few of those moments before, KB, John Lester, etc. So hopefully Javi gets his flowers from the Wrigley faithful. And yeah, that's about what we got. So day off on Monday, and then again, for whatever is left in this season, this has got to be a week of cleaning up W's. Otherwise, that elimination number is going to shrink pretty rapidly. The Cubs are behind a lot of teams, and yeah, so that is the situation.
My one last thought before we sign off.
Sure.
I might get in trouble for saying this, but I'm like ready for October and just moving on. I really am.
Yeah.
I'm ready. I'm
No, I hear
kind
you.
of exhausted talking about this team because we've talked about this team in similar ways for almost 2 straight years. I'm
Yeah.
really tired of talking about this team.
I hear you. I don't really think that that's I don't know that that's as controversial as
I
it
mean,
might.
I'll miss baseball and everything, but
Yeah.
I'm exhausted with this team, dude. I
Yeah.
really am.
And
Same talking
look, I mean,
points.
I think as fans, we have our complaints, we have our concerns, we have this, but we all are ready to go. We're giving our full support, and it's a lot of hours of watching baseball and supporting a team, and for a lot of people, a lot of money that they invest into supporting the team and going to games and et cetera, et cetera. And this is the last couple of years have been a particularly taxing brand of baseball to be a fan of. So many close losses, so many frustrating games that they give away, or bad starters they don't take enough advantage of on the offensive side. It's a particularly tiring brand of baseball that they have played.
It's
And this year in
redundant.
particular, kind of unlike last year, it was a slow start. They kicked it into gear and they fell just short. Like they ran out of gas, like a car in a race. Like the tank went to empty just before the finish line. A bummer. Oh, well, it happens. This year has been so much more of like, are they back? No, they're not. Oh, they had a good series. Oh, they just
You know
played their
what it
worst
is, to use your car
baseball
analogy? It's
in,
like
yeah,
hoping you can start your car and it goes.
yeah.
That's what
That
that
is
is.
how this year has felt.
Yeah.
And, you do have those moments. And I think this week was a perfect, this was a perfect week to sum it up. Like they get back to within 3. Everybody's like,
Huh.
immediately swept. 2 run
It's so dark and
losses,
funny.
just like the perfect kind of like encapsulation
I
of
hate it.
this team. Yeah. So it's been frustrating. I'm with you. I root for them. I want them to do well, but it's been a very taxing brand of baseball that they play.
Yeah.
And, and again, we talk about it all the time, but it's exponentially more frustrating when it was a set of circumstances that we just spent all offseason worried about, Brendan. It's like one of those things. And we weren't alone in that. They were sentiments shared by so many people, but like watching them lose so many close games or blow games or be inconsistent on offense, it does make you kind of want to like bash your head into a wall. Because you're like, yeah, man, like we were talking about that in November. Like, I know I was worried about it, and here we go.
Well, it's just funny too, because like in some ways you kind of justify the direction, and don't get it twisted. Justification is a stupid word to even say, but you justify because you think they're not over the luxury tax, and then you hear last week, like just like, you know what?
Like a
Sorry,
real
we're
evil earlier.
Yeah, we're actually over the luxury tax.
Yeah,
and then you start thinking, man, I should have been ripping you a year ago if that's the case.
Well, and
this team.
so I do see it in our YouTube chat from Phil, and he says this team is one game over 500 since the beginning of last year. And I feel like that just sums it up perfectly, Brendan. Yeah. Like the Cubs are in a cycle right now, and each year has different expectations and, is relative to, okay, we traded these guys in 2021. So what's the progress of all this? But at this point, you're 3 years removed from that. Your president's in his 4th year, entering the final year of his contract. And for the last 2 years, you are unequivocally mid. Like, and that sums it up, man. Like, this is one of the most valuable franchises in the league. You are plenty of years removed from your sell-off to start this retool. Teams have turned things around quicker than this. Teams have bottomed out and come back to the top quicker than the pace that you're on. And this is 2 years in a row where you are just mid. You're just a middle of the road, 500 average, kind of their team. And it's just not good enough for this franchise. It's too long of a period of just being mired in mediocrity. And it's not good enough, man.
I'm dying laughing because, you're in your Cubs hat over there, your Cubs jersey, season ticket holder.
Yeah.
You're part of the problem, Corey, and your scoreboard watching, giving me all these scores over here. Man, you're such an idiot, dude.
Yeah.
We're both such idiots. It's okay.
A curse.
It's a curse. It's an illness. What are you going to do?
Anyway. But, look, man, like it was 75 degrees in the beautiful city of Chicago, Illinois. I'm out at beautiful historic Wrigley Field. As I've said many times, we're not going to get into this at the end of the show, but I will not bear responsibility for the sins of a billionaire. All right. So
listen,
that's not going to happen.
Listen, every time I watch Wrigley, I wish I was there. The biggest draw for me to Chicago, my hometown, is Wrigley Field. It really is. Even going back there during the summer, walking around the area, Wrigleyville, I always get the thought, like, why don't I just move back? Why don't I just go back? It's beautiful. So I understand why you're so stupid, but at the same time, I share the same stupidity as you do.
Yeah. It is what it is. So that's the state of things, and the state of things isn't good, folks. Decent series again against the Blue Jays here this weekend, but after the sweep earlier, you really did kind of need to come out of here with a sweep. And of course, some of the teams around you picking up some W's. So the Cubs will head into this off day on Monday with a steep mountain to climb. As always, Cody, Luke, Ryan, Jared, me, Brendan, we'll be here till the finish line. Our guy, Kevin Wells, of course, to talk you through it, to sort through everything, post-game shows, everything. We'll have you covered. But it is indeed a steep hill to climb for the 2024 Chicago Cubs. And I don't blame a lot of you if you have bid your farewell to the climb. Yeah, you are turning around.
We'll see you back in November once the GM meetings start and all that.
So it is what it is. As always, we appreciate you guys' support. Brendan and I will be with you next Sunday after the Cubs wrap up that series with the Marlins. I think a little earlier start time with the Cubs being on the East Coast. So we appreciate your support. We will talk to you again next week. And as always, go Cubs.
We all silly like the mayor.